Here we are on the shortest day of the year. Where has the sun gone? That's what the ancient people wondered. And out of their fear of the darkness and the uncertainty, they brought the light in. They brought in a Yule log and kept it burning for 12 days. Don't let it go out. Maybe the sun will come back. Light candles against the darkness and dance in the glow of them. Greenery. How can holly and ivy be still green in all this cold? It's miraculous. Bring it in. Deck the halls. So greenery and light was a sign of hope in the dead of winter. It's a sign that it will all come back. And the early Christians needed that reassurance too. They needed to know that life would go on. And so they took these symbols and put them into Christian festival. So tonight, we will warm ourselves with the light of literature and sit back as we share some poems and stories that capture some of the joys of this season that we sorely need this year of all years. I'd like to start simple poems, two simple poems, children's poems really, by women, 20th century women. One of them was from Michigan, the other from Minnesota. They knew winter, so they write with authority. This is December by Aileen Fisher. I like days with a snow white collar, and nights when the moon is a silver dollar, and hills are filled with eiderdown stuffing, and your breath makes smoke like an engine puffing. I like days when feathers are snowing, and all the eaves have petticoats showing, and the air is cold, and the wires are humming, but you feel all warm with Christmas coming. Yes, that expectation of Christmas, which right now we're about to rush into, and sometimes it feels like rushing. The joy of preparing and the anxiety of preparing. Getting the menu right. Did I get the turkey? Will the Zoom work? That's the new one now. But there's joy and freneticism in preparing for Christmas. And Marchette Chute captures it in Christmas. My goodness, it's Christmas again. The bells are all ringing. I do not know when I've been so excited. The tree is all fixed, the candles are lighted, the pudding is mixed, the wreath's on the door, the carols are sung, the presents are wrapped, the holly is hung, the turkey is sitting all safe in its pan, and I'm behaving as calm as I can. Yes, captures it. Well, my favorite short story of Christmas was written by O. Henry. He wrote it in 1905. Takes place in New York City in a young couple trying to have a Merry Christmas. It is the gift of the Magi. $1.87. That was all. 60 cents of it was in pennies. Pennies saved 1 and 2 at a time by bulldozing the grocer and the vegetable man and the butcher until one's cheeks burned with the silent imputations of parsimony that such close dealing implied. 3 times Della counted it. $1.87. And the next day would be Christmas. There was clearly nothing to do but just flop down on the shabby little couch and howl. So Della did it, which instigates the moral reflection that life is made up of Sobs, sniffles, and smiles, with sniffles predominating. While the mistress of the home is gradually subsiding from the first stage to the second, take a look at the home. A furnished flat of $8 a week. In the vestibule below was a letter box into which no letter would go, and an electric button from which no mortal finger could coax a ring. Also appertaining thereunto was a card bearing the name Mr. James Dillingham Young. The Dillingham had been flung to the breeze during a former period of prosperity when its possessor was being paid $30 a week. Now, when the income was down to 20, the letters of Dillingham looked blurred, as though they were thinking seriously of contracting to a modest and unassuming D. But whenever Mr. James Dillingham Young came home and reached his flat above, he was called Jim, and greatly hugged by Mrs. James Dillingham Young, already introduced to you as Della, which is all very good. Della finished her cry and attended to her cheeks with powder rag. She stood by the window and looked dully at a gray cat walking a gray fence in a gray backyard. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day, and she had only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim. And she'd been saving every penny she could for months with this result. $20 a week doesn't go far. Expenses have been greater than she calculated. They always are. Only $1.87 to buy a present for Jim, her Jim. Oh, many a happy hour she'd spent planning for something nice for him, something fine and rare and sterling, something just a little bit near to being worthy of the honor of being owned by James Dillingham Young. There was a pier glass between the windows of the room. Perhaps you've seen pier glass in an $8 flat. A very thin, very agile person might, by observing his reflection in rapid sequence of longitudinal strips, obtain a fairly accurate conception of his looks. Della, being slender, she mastered the art. Suddenly she whirled from the window and stood before the glass. Her eyes were shining brilliantly, yet her face had lost its color within 20 seconds. Rapidly, she pulled down her hair and let it fall to the full length. Now, there were two possessions of the James Dillingham Youngs to which they both took a mighty pride. One was Jim's gold watch. It had been his father's and his grandfather's. And the other was Della's hair. Had the Queen of Sheba lived in the flat across the air shack, Della would have let her hair hang out the window someday to dry, just to depreciate Her Majesty's jewels and gifts. Had King Solomon been the janitor, with all his treasures piled up in the basement, Jim would have pulled out his watch every time he passed, just to see him pluck at his beard from him. So now, Della's beautiful hair fell about her and shining and like a cascade of brown waters. It reached below her knee, and it made itself almost a garment for her. And then she did it up again nervously, quickly. Once she faltered for a minute and stood while a tear or two splashed on the worn red carpet. On went her old brown jacket and on went her brown hat, and with a whirl of skirts and with a brilliant sparkle still in her eyes, she fluttered down the stairs to the street. When she stopped, the sign said, Madame Sofroni, hair goods of all kinds. One flight up Della ran and collected herself, panting. Madame, large, too white, chilly, hardly looked the Sofroni. Will you buy my hair? I buy hair. Take your hat off and let's have a sight of the looks of it. Down rippled the brown cascade. $20, lifting the mask, the practiced hand. Give it to me quick. Oh, and the next 2 hours tripped by on rosy wings. Forget the hashed metaphor. She was ransacking the stores for Jim's present. She found it at last. It surely had been made for Jim. No one else. There was no other like it in any of the stores. She turned them all inside out. It was a platinum fob chain, simple and chaste in design, properly proclaiming its value by substance alone and not by meretricious ornamentation, as all good things should do. It was even worthy of the watch. As soon as she saw it, she knew it must be Jim's. It was like him, quietness and value. The description applied to both. $21 they took from her for it, and she hurried home with the 87 cents. With that chain on his watch, Jim might properly be anxious about the time in any company. Grand as the watch was, he sometimes looked at it on the sly on account of the old leather strap that used in place of the chain. When Della reached her home, her intoxication gave way a little to prudence and reason. She got out her curling iron and lighted a gas and went to work repairing the ravages made by generosity added to love, which is always a tremendous task, dear friends, a mammoth task. Within 40 minutes, her head was covered with tiny, close-lying curls that made her look wonderfully like a truant schoolboy. She looked at her reflection in the mirror long and carefully and critically. If Jim doesn't kill me before he takes a second look at me, he'll say I look like a Coney Island chorus girl. But what could I do? What could I do with $1.87? At 7 o'clock, the coffee was made, and the frying pan was on the back of the stove, hot and ready to cook the chops. Jim was never late. Della doubled the fob chain in her hand, and she sat on the corner of the table near the door that he always entered. And she heard his step on the stairway down in the first flight. And she turned white for a second. And she had a habit of saying little silent prayers about the simplest everyday things. And now she whispered, please, God, make him think I'm still pretty. The door opened. Jim stepped in and closed it. He looked thin and very serious. Poor fella. He was only 22 and with the burden of a family. He needed a new overcoat and he was without gloves. Jim stepped inside the door, as immovable as a setter at the scent of a quail. His eyes were fixed on Della. And there was an expression in them that she could not read. It terrified her. It was not anger, nor surprise, nor disapproval, nor horror, nor any of the sentiments she'd been prepared for. He simply stared at her fixedly with that peculiar expression on his face. Delia wriggled off the table and went for him. Jim, darling, just don't look at me that way. I had my hair cut off and so that because I couldn't have lived through Christmas without giving you a present. It'll grow back very fast. You won't mind, will you? I just had to do it. My hair grows awfully fast. Say Merry Christmas, boy, and let's be happy. You don't know what a nice, what a beautiful, what a wonderful gift I've got for you. You've cut off your hair? Asked Jim, laboriously, as if he had not arrived at that patent fact yet, even after the hardest mental labor. Cut it off and sewed it. Don't you like me just as well? Anyhow, I'm me without my hair, ain't I? Jim looked about the room curiously. You see, your hair's gone, he said with an air of idiocy. You needn't look for it. It's sold. I tell you, sold and gone. It's Christmas Eve, boy. Be good to me, for I did it for you. Maybe the hairs of my head were numbered, but nobody could ever count my love for you. Shall I put the chops on? Jim? Out of his trance, Jim seemed quickly to wake. He enfolded his Della. For 10 seconds, let's regard with discreet scrutiny some inconsequential object in the other direction. $8 a week or $1 million a year. What's the difference? A mathematician or a wit would give you the wrong answer. The Magi brought valuable gifts, but that was not among them. This dark assertion will be illuminated later on. Jim drew a package from his overcoat pocket and threw it on the table. Don't make any mistake, Dale, about me. I don't think there's anything in the way of a haircut or a shave or a shampoo that would make me like my girl any less. But if you'll unwrap that package, you'll see why you had me going there for a while. White fingers and nimble tore at the string and the paper, and then an ecstatic scream of joy, and then hysterical tears and wails, necessitating the immediate employment of all the comforting powers of the Lord of the flat. For there lay the combs. The set of combs, side and back, that Della had worshipped for long in a Broadway window. Beautiful combs, just tortoise shell with jeweled rims. Just the shape to wear in the beautiful vanished hair. They were expensive combs, she knew that. Her heart had simply craved and yearned over them without the least hope of possession. And now they were hers, but the tresses that should have adorned the coveted adornments were gone. But she hugged them to her bosom, and at length she was able to look up with dim eyes and a smile and say, my hair grows awfully fast. And then Della leaped up with a little singed cat cry. Oh, Jim had not seen his beautiful present. She held it out to him eagerly in her open palm. The dull, precious metal seemed to flash with reflection of her bright and ardent spirit. Isn't it dandy, Jim? I hunted all over town to find it. You'll have to look at the time 100 times a day now. Give me your watch. I want to see how it fits on it. Instead of obeying, Jim tumbled down on the couch, put his hands under the back of his head, and smiled in an odd way. Dale, let's put our Christmas presents away and keep them for a while. Yeah. They're too nice to use just at present. I sold the watch to get the money to buy you your coats. And now, suppose you put those chops on. The Magi, as you know, were wise men, wonderfully wise men, who brought gifts to the babe in the manger. Being wise, their gifts were no doubt wise ones, possibly bearing the privileged exchange in case of duplication. And here I have lamely related to you the uneventful chronicles of two foolish children in a flat who most unwisely sacrificed for each other the greatest treasures of their house. But in a last word to the wise of these days, let it be said that of all who give gifts, these two were the wisest. Everywhere they're wisest. They are the Magi.
Oh, wow. That was great. It made me cry.
Yeah, it was lovely, wasn't it?
Well, it seems that gift giving is not just a property of humankind. Evidently, the animals get involved as well. At least that's what the legends say. Magic happens on Christmas Eve in the animal kingdom because they were there in the stable. They were part of it. And they pay tribute. It is said, if you go down to your barn at midnight on Christmas Eve, you will see all the cows on their knees. This is something that rural folk know. And one young rural boy in England knew it well. He grew up to be a great author. His name was Thomas Hardy. And he wrote about that legend called the oxen. Christmas Eve and 12 o'clock. Now they are all on their knees. An elder said, as we sat in a flock by the embers at heart's side ease. We pictured the meek, mild creatures where they dwelt in their strawy pen. Nor did it occur to one of us there to doubt they were kneeling then. So fair a fancy, few would weave in these days. Yet I feel if someone said on Christmas Eve, come, see the oxen kneel in the lonely Barton by yonder coombe our childhood used to know, I should go with him in the gloom, hoping it might be so. Well, Christmas night of readings cannot be one without Dickens. And it's very interesting that Charles Dickens felt that darkness of the solstice. Dickens, who changed the world of Christmas with his book. He was in a depression in 1843, his own depression. He had a special name for it. It was called the Chuzzlewit Agonies. Martin Chuzzlewit had not been well received. And he was sick of it and didn't know what to do or what to write. So he just took a sideline and he just started writing A Christmas Carol. And of course, A Christmas Carol is filled with lessons of what this season means. But of course, it takes a long time for Scrooge himself to figure that out. And at the beginning, he is very upset that his nephew, Fred, has come over to wish him a Merry Christmas and to invite him for Christmas dinner. Merry Christmas! Out upon Merry Christmas! What's Christmas to you? But a time for paying bills without money. A time for finding yourself a year older, not an hour richer. If I could work my will, every idiot who goes about with a Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding with a stake of holly through his heart. Merry Christmas indeed. Much good may it do you. Much good has it ever done you. Fred has a different opinion. I'm sure I always thought of Christmas as a good time, a kind, forgiving, charitable, pleasant time. The only time I know of in the long calendar of the year when men and women seem by one consent to open up their shut hearts freely and to think of people below them as if they were really fellow passengers to the grave and not another race of creatures bound on other journeys. And therefore, though it has never put a scrap of gold or silver in my pocket, I believe it has done me good, and it will do me good, and I say, God bless it. No, Scrooge doesn't learn from this lovely tribute to Christmas. He dismisses his nephew. Good afternoon. But when the ghost of Christmas past gets his hands on Scrooge, takes him on a journey, Scrooge is reminded that he once had those feelings in his youth. When the ghost takes him to the scene of the preparation of a Christmas dance, at the place where young Scrooge, impressionable and under the warm influence of his kindly boss, the joyous, Christmassy Mr. Fezziwig. Well, here's what proceeds. Old Fezziwig laid down his pen, looked up at the clock, which pointed at the hour of 7. He rubbed his hands, adjusted his capacious waistcoat, laughed all over himself, and called out in a comfortable, oily, rich, fat, jovial voice, "Yo there, Ebenezer! Dick! You home, my boys, no more work tonight. Christmas Eve, Dick, Ebenezer, Christmas! Clear away, my lads, and let's have lots of room here. Hilla-ho, Dick! Cheer up, Ebenezer!" Clear away. There was nothing they wouldn't have cleared away, and couldn't have cleared away with old Fezziwig looking on. It was done in a minute. Every movable was packed off, and as if it were dismissed from public life forevermore. The floor was swept and watered, the lamps were trimmed, fuel was heaped upon the fire, and the warehouse was as snug and warm and dry and bright a ballroom as you would desire to see upon a winter's night. There's that light again, that warmth and that light. Well, I'm going to take you back to New York City, to 1897, to a newspaper here called the New York Sun, and to the editorial writer for the New York Sun, Frances P. Church, who responded to a letter from Virginia O'Hanlon, a little girl with a big question on her mind. Saturday, 21st, 1897, dear editor, I am 8 years old. Some of my little friends say there's no Santa Claus. Papa says, if you see it in the sun, it's so. Please tell me the truth. Is there a Santa Claus? Virginia O'Hanlon, 115 West 95th Street, New York City. And dear listeners, I want you to know I am reading this at 250 West 99th Street, just blocks away from where Virginia, her brownstone still exists. Well, Francis Church, a very grown-up man who wrote grown-up editorials, some of them very pompous, wrote this in reply. Virginia, your little friends are wrong. They've been affected by the skepticism of a skeptical age. They do not believe except they see. They think that nothing can be which is not comprehensible by their little minds. And all minds, Virginia, whether they be men's or children's, are little. Yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus. He exists as certainly as love and generosity and devotion exists. And you know that they abound and give to your life its highest beauty and joy. Alas, how dreary would be the world if there were no Santa Claus. It would be as dreary as if there were no Virginias. There would be no childlike faith then, and no poetry, no romance, no to make tolerable this existence. We would have no enjoyment except in sense and sight. The eternal light with which childhood fills the world would be extinguished. Not believe in Santa Claus, you might as well not believe in fairies. You might get your papa to hire men to watch in all the chimneys on Christmas Eve to catch Santa Claus. But even if they did not see Santa Claus coming down, what would that prove? Nobody sees Santa Claus. But that's no sign that there is no Santa Claus. The most real things in this world are those that no children or men can see. Did you ever see fairies dancing on the lawn? Of course not. That doesn't mean they're not there. Nobody can conceive or imagine all the wonders there are, unseen or unseeable, in this world. No Santa Claus? Thank God he lives, and he lives forever. 1,000 years from now, Virginia, nay, 10 times 10,000 years from now, he will continue to make glad the heart of childhood. I have one more poem, and it was written by Christina Rossetti, an English poet, born into a family of Victorian poets. Her father, her brothers, all were poets. And she wrote this poem in 1872. Years later, great composer Gustav Holst wrote a tune for it in 1906, and it entered the Anglican hymnal for Christmas. But it is a solstice carol. It captures the bleakness of winter, the harsh, cold, unrelenting, kind of like this year's been. I think what we've learned from these readings is that getting through the winter has always been hard. From the first pagans shivering in the cold, praying for the return of the sun, through turn of the century New York and struggling New Yorkers in their cold water flats, to people of today, some facing Christmas alone, families separated, some having lost loved ones, and not even being able to have said goodbye. Hard, harsh, cold year. Well, the solstice is about being together in the gloom and making our way together in whatever way we can towards the light. These holiday readings tell us that the way to keep the light burning and to warm us is for us to give of ourselves to others. In the bleak midwinter, frosty winds made moan. Earth stood hard as iron, water like a stone. Snow had fallen, snow on snow, snow on snow. In the bleak midwinter, long, long ago. What can I give him, poor as I am? If I were a shepherd, I would bring a lamb. If I were a wise man, I would do my part. Yet, what I can, I give you. Give my heart. Happy solstice, glad Yule, happy Hanukkah, happy Kwanzaa, Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Linda.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Linda.
And happy solstice.
Wonderful.
Where did you get that beautiful hair?
I have to do it.